Hi, this is Rick again, the bicycle fitness coach. I put a recent video together and I kind of had to redo it because it kind of came in at the middle of the topic instead of really understanding what the preamble for this whole thing is. So here's the latest video. I see this all the time coming in on Bike Fits. People come in with a used bike. They think they get a great deal. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. So the title of this is You Want to Get a Used Bike. As an example, here's a nice one, 2014 Cannondale Cat 10 with a carbon fork. The seller wants $11.99. So is there a catch? Let's check it out. Here's the bike, currently on Craigslist. Bike is $11.99. Envy fork. Again, we'll get into why I recommend always getting a new fork on a used bike. $4.50. A stem, yeah, it looks like the stem is a little bit too long. The bike fitter, they might have a little issue with overreaching, having some hand numbing issues, etc. That's going to be an issue. So I'll do stem about $70. Who would, in their right mind, is going to ride this saddle here? $225 for a new saddle. Pedals, oh, no pedals. We need some pedals. $200 for a good set of pedals. Now, all of a sudden, that $11.99 bike is now $21.44 with tax. Everybody forgets about adding tax to their baseline. So we're now at $23.10. Okay, now incidentals. Maybe you need cables and housing. Maybe some new tires. Depending on how old the bike is, how worn out pieces and parts are. How about brake pads? Handlebar tape? You don't want to touch that stuff that's currently on there. A chain? Yeah, a chain to save the drivetrain, a new cassette. Maybe a tune-up you want to get from a local bike shop. Subtotal $550. Not a bad deal for that many parts and that much is being done. Tax $593. At a minimum, you'll need a new fork. So what is it? Bike plus a fork, total with tax. Your $11.99 purchase just went to $17.77. At a minimum. At a maximum, that $11.99 bike is going to cost you the $23.10 plus the $593, so $29.03. So you're not just shy of $3,000 for the great deal that appeared to be $11.99. So, as an example, here's another nice bike, a brand new 2023 Giant TCR Advance 2 Pro Compact. It doesn't have the Ultegra that the other bike had, but it has the new 105, which is as good, if not better, than the older Ultegra. $2,500 for the bike. Of course, you don't need a stem. The dealer more than likely will swap out the right size stem for you since it's a brand new bike. A saddle, again, you'd probably swap out a saddle for what's currently on the bike. We'll get into saddles on another video. Pedals, you're going to need some pedals. So now you're about a $2,700, $209 tax, so $29.09. So let's compare a $2,900 Cannondale 2014 against a brand new Giant 2023 Giant 2909. Yeah, $6 difference. So again, go through all the numbers when you do want to get a used bike. That's what I recommend. And a fork. Why do I need a new fork? This comes up all the time. I see so much fork damage, so many damaged forks. We'll get into some pictures here in a minute. Why do I need a new fork on a used bike? Number one is you don't know what condition the current fork is. Is there any cracks in it? Is the steer tube cracked? Most of the pieces of the fork that are critical are hidden up inside the head tube. Here is why you need a new fork. Broken arm, handlebars stayed on the bike, but the fork blades broke. There it is. Good example. Here's another good example. The rider ripped the top of the steer tube right off the top of the fork. Here's a website, bustedcarbon.com. This guy wrote, recently bought a frame that came with a full carbon fork, a used frame, I should say, built it up, took it out for a ride and noticed the handlebars were all wiggly. Took the handlebars off and look at the crack that was in it. This thing was ready to fail and dump them on the ground. In fact, if you look at this picture, clearly you can see the witness mark from where the stem was over clamped onto the steer tube right there. Here's another, rip the top of the steer tube. Here's a Cervelo. Here's another Cervelo. Here's a recent customer that came in, actually came in about a year ago. Cracks in his steer tube. Here's that same fork. I cut it, which we'll get into some good in-depth pictures here in a minute. Look how over clamped this stem was on top of the steer tube. It was so clamped that it's hard to see in this picture, but if you look at the actual steer tube, you can actually see the witness mark on this side, on the right side of the steer tube, coming through the inside of the steer tube. Also, on the right side with the red arrow, you can see the top of the crack. I always prep my stems. Here is the inside of a stem that I put on the Giant TCR that I have. The inside completely polished. I'll take it down to a 220 grit. This is the inside of the one side of the stem, and the other photo is from the other side of the stem. But you can see there are no sharp edges. The issue with the stems is that when they are machined, they don't deburr any of the leading edges of the stem. They just leave them full 90-degree sharp cuts, and that's what you see cutting into the steer tubes and cutting into the carbon fiber. So I always recommend taking some sandpaper, taking 5 minutes, and completely polish the inside by hand of the inside, every mating surface of the stem. Get into the expansion plugs. There's a lot of, I don't see this too often anymore, but every once in a while you'll see the expander plug with these razor sharp points. Somebody has installed them into a carbon fiber fork. That's a no-no. 2 is more of a common type of expansion plug. What happens is the compression or expansion plug goes inside the steer tube. You tighten this bolt comes up, it expands this carrier, and it wedges itself into the top of the steer tube. So when you put the stem down and take the preload out of it, it won't pull the stem back out of the steer tube. So this essentially locks the top of the expansion plug, locks the stem into the steer tube. Again, I'll recommend a full length expansion plug, not the little half pieces, and you'll see why in a minute. Here are some good examples of expansion plugs. Here's 4, for example. The insertion length of the Cane Creek is 46 millimeters. Warriors, you can get them on Amazon. They're 50 millimeters. Dita, 69, almost 70 millimeters long, and Origin 8, 90. So you can get, no matter where and how many spacers you put on these expansion plugs, you can normally have full support on the inside of the steer tube. As an example, this might be okay with no spacers on the top. On the first picture is the pinch bolt. Will more than likely clamp and put pressure and have support of the top of the expansion plug to support against, and the bottom with the bottom pinch bolt. But what happens if you put a spacer on? Now the pinch bolts are locking right onto an unsupported carbon steer tube. And what happens when you clamp a steer tube, you tighten and tighten and tighten, all of a sudden goes crack. And there's the crack right there. That's what you don't want to do. Here's one with a little bit more purchase area, but you're getting into the same issue. It's unsupported. And now if you take, this is the King Creek, it's the shortest of the ones that you just saw. The longest is about twice as long as this. So you can fine tune the amount of support that you want support in back of both of the pinch bolts. So here's a recent development that this is the second picture at the bottom of the page. We'll step over like this. So a client came in with a fork, and it was compromised with the crack, as you saw on top of the steer tube. Another client came in with a giant fork that was also cracked, and we tore it apart. We cut it in half. Basically, if you look at the steer tube where it intersects the fork crown, that's the part that you're seeing on the bottom two pictures. The wall thickness of the Giant is 7 millimeters. So you have 7 millimeters on the left side, 7 millimeters on the right side. The other fork, name brand bike, had a wall thickness of 3 millimeters. Well, if you want to build a lightweight frame, how do you do that? You put less carbon fiber in it. Well, this is one area where you really don't want to put less carbon fiber in it. Not only is it unsupported, but if you look at the middle of the Giant, the bottom left picture, you look at the middle of the Giant's steer tube, they have actually inserted a aluminum shim that is used as extra support that goes into almost into the fork blades. You'll see this here in a second. Here's the fork again, top picture being cut in half. Bottom picture, you can see the aluminum shim that is coming from the steer tube into the fork crown. And the picture on the top right, now you can see the aluminum shim, how far it goes down into. So I really commend Giant for building a top quality fork that's safe to use. In summary, if buying a used bike, I recommend a high quality fork. I use either an OEM or Envy. Also a high quality torque wrench. I use a Topeak torque stick, which is 4x20 Newton meters. There's a picture of it right there. And the right expansion plug. So I'm really stressing on this video is fork safety. So many people neglect the forks, and that's the issue that people will hopefully not come to regret. So what's at risk? Really all carbon parts. There's a lot of broken handlebars out there. There are broken seat posts. There's broken seat rails, broken wheels, mostly carbon fiber. So just stay safe out there, be careful, and remember, if you get a used bike, the first thing you want to do is replace the fork.